Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome to another episode of ISTJ Info Dumping. I hope you really like these curtains that I have. Get used to them while they last because I am home alone for a week and a day, and my family is not going to let me use this recording space too often. So I figured if you're given a gift, take advantage of it. I originally filmed a video early today about what not to say and do to an ISTJ, but it came across as very negative and almost a little bit like an ESTJ, where I was constantly belittling people that didn't live up to my expectations, and I didn't want to come across as too rude or too bossy. So I decided instead to change it to things to say and do to an ISTJ, or to make their day and show that you care about them. These are in no particular order. I just wrote them in the order that they came into my head, except for the first one, because I figured for those of you with lower introverted sensing, maybe it would help if you got the most important one first, so that if you zone out through the rest of the video, it won't be that big of a deal. So with that out of the way, let us get into it. The number one most important thing to do to make an ISTJ happy is to remember stuff. A lot of times I have heard it said that the dominant function is the one that everyone projects onto all the other types, is like, how can you be so stupid as to not use this? So to give a couple of examples, INFPs and ISFPs might wonder why people hate their emotions and aren't true to themselves. INTPs and ISTPs might wonder why people aren't more logical and analytical. ISTJs and ISFJs wonder why everyone is so forgetful and clumsy. ESTJs and ENTJs might wonder how people can be so unproductive, so on and so on. So ISTJs get really annoyed when people are forgetful, or if the several details that the ISTJ shares are considered irrelevant or forgotten about the next day. They like to think that everything they do and everything they put time into is something that you value, because ISTJs really, really, really treasure their loved ones and their friends. I would say that they probably care the most about friends and family out of all of the types. That's a discussion for another video. So if you say forget a hangout or just aren't taking it as seriously as the ISTJ does, that is going to really hurt their feelings. So try to remember the details of what they tell you. Even if you have to say, oh, hey, you've told me that before. The ISTJ will say, oh, so you do remember what I've been talking about. That's great. I'm so glad you've been paying attention. Especially if you're an INFJ or INTJ. Those guys, it seems like their brains are kind of like leaky sponges where they just can't hold anything in. So when they pay attention, you know that they're keepers. The next thing on my list is respond promptly. Now, I get it. People are busy. I'm probably not as busy as the average person and a heck of a lot less busy than the average ISTJ. But I think I try to find time within the busyness to still respond to people on a relatively quick basis. Like sometimes when I'm at work, I might take 1 minute out of my work schedule to send a text. And that 1 minute my boss is not going to penalize me for, because I already asked her about the rule for cell phone use. Or you could send a text on the toilet. I think people don't think creatively enough about how to solve problems, and that's why the ISTJs are constantly waiting and waiting, thinking, why is it taking a week to get a response to a simple yes or no question? If you are the type that cannot respond promptly, explain your reasoning to the ISTJ in depth, and be prepared to explain it over and over again, because ISTJs are not mind readers, and they're certainly not good at reading between the lines. So maybe say, okay, this particular week, this is my agenda, and this is why I can't text you on the toilet, because of energy efficiency. Explain in depth why you might have a hard time responding promptly, and assure the ISTJ with your actions afterward that you're not. I had to stop myself from sounding a bit insulting, but going back to the first thing, that you're not too forgetful. The next one is be punctual. This is another super important one. I mean, they're all important, but this one is probably number two. I just didn't write this out in any particular order. ISTJs put every minute of their time to good use. Even if you think they're being lazy and like, oh, you're taking a nap or you're just reading a book instead of getting things done, they're actually doing that to save on their energy so that when it's time to be efficient, they have more energy to get it done better. That's why the ETJs often suffer from burnout because they don't take that time to take care of themselves. Whereas ISTJs can say, oh, I'm just getting started because I actually took some time to slow down. So as a result, that also means that when they plan out a hangout or a family gathering, they are putting in even every little minute to good use where they can say, okay, if the hangout is at 8 o'clock, then I will make the best possible use of what happens at 7:59 to make sure that I get my shoes on and get all set so that when it comes to exactly 8 o'clock, I'm all ready. And if you're late, well, quite frankly, it feels a bit insulting because it sounds like the time the ISTJ put into meticulously making sure that they could be available for you and be the best person possible isn't respected. And being an introverted feeler, it kind of hurts. Like, if you don't respect my time, you don't respect me kind of deal. And if you can't be punctual, explain your reasoning, but do it in a logical way. Do not say, oh, I'm sorry, I just forgot, or hey, I slept in, sorry about that. ISTJs aren't really going to like that. Instead, do something like what my INFJ friend did the other day. We were about to have a phone call at 8 o'clock, and at 7:59 she texted me and said that she had a shoulder spasm, which admittedly she had said earlier, but she reinforced the point by saying, I know we were supposed to talk at 8 o'clock, but my shoulder is really sore, and so it's really hard for me to get into an adequate position to be able to talk on the phone without disturbing people, so therefore expect me to be a few minutes late. She was 1 minute late. But the fact that she explained such a logical behavior so thoroughly, it allowed me to be okay with her being late because I was like, oh, yeah, of course, you want to take care of your health. You don't want to put yourself in terrible pain because of me. Now, what do I think about people canceling because of sickness? That's probably another subject for another day. I personally am the type of person that I would push through with sickness unless if it was something contagious, where I'd say, I said I would hang out with this person today, and I am going to say it even if I have to make allowances. So I would hope that people would do the same to me, but I don't know. Sometimes my dad says you can't expect everyone to be a perfect saint. Next up is be honest. ISTJs always like to tell the truth, and they expect people to tell the truth in return. They don't like it when people even tell little white lies. Now, I could hear some of you saying, no, wait a minute, Paul. ISTJs are reserved with when they show their emotions. So what if other people are the same? What if there are things they don't want to talk about? Here's how I've gotten around that in the past. Sometimes I had to go into work at my old job, and I really would not want to talk about what I was feeling. And people would ask me, oh, hey, Paul, how are you doing today? And I wanted to say, oh, I am doing absolutely terrible, and I want you to leave me alone because I don't want anyone to talk to me. But what I said instead was, well, this new game came out, and I've been really enjoying it. So I didn't lie, I just told a different truth. So instead of directly answering the question with my well-being, I mentioned something else that is making a positive well-being in another category. Now, maybe the intuitive types aren't as good as that because they see everything in a big picture, whatever that means, and I see everything in compartments, so maybe I can separate my emotions into categories. But if you keep in mind that ISTJs put in a lot of effort so that when they do anything, it's very much the honest truth, they want you to do that in return. That also means that you can take an ISTJ at total face value when they compliment you. Because they don't just say stuff to make you feel better. They're not the types that'll say, oh, well, I want to keep the peace, so I'm just going to compliment you because of it. They say it because they really meant it, and they've really pushed their tertiary introverted feeling further to want to compliment you because expressing emotions is typically hard for them. So if they're willing to put in that much effort, they expect you to put in that much effort in return. And again, you don't always have to tell the full truth, but as long as you don't outright lie or fabricate the truth, then you'll be in an ISTJ's good books. The fifth one might be a bit of a surprise for those of you that are feeling types, but the fifth one is affirm their emotions. ISTJs are not ESTJs. They are not ashamed of their emotions. They do not think emotions make them weak. However, they often have a hard time expressing them or are reserved about when and where and how much should be shown. So it's not like they hate them. They just don't think that they should be used all the time, that they should be used on a when needed basis. They like to think about things in a very factual and objective way, and since feelings by nature are subjective, ISTJs are going to say, okay, this is not going to help in making an objective, rational decision. However, because they don't share their emotions very much, they're often given some insults such as, oh, you guys are a bunch of robots, and oh, you think your emotions are just a bunch of pesky work, or you hate emotions. And that can make them think that their own emotions are terrible, and therefore they'll want to share them even less because they're not told that what they feel matters by people. I actually just watched a YouTube video today by Billy Ray Brandt, who's one of the ultimate defenders of men in this world where it seems like every man is called a toxic masculinist or a rapist. And she said, just because men don't broadcast their breakup feelings on TikTok doesn't mean they don't have feelings at all. They just don't feel like sharing them with everyone. So in the same way, I think men are conditioned too much to repress their emotions, but ISTJs are going to do it whether they're a man or a woman. Not repress them. I should rephrase that as say them at the right time. So if you can say, hey, whatever you're feeling is valid, you might not necessarily be right, but what you're feeling is valid, then they're going to feel a lot better. I remember something my ex-girlfriend said to me once that made me really get more comfortable with expressing myself. And she said, it's okay if you're not totally perfect right now. It's okay if you have messy emotions that don't make sense. What matters is that you're trying to do the right thing despite what you might be feeling. Not in those exact words. She wasn't exactly the elegant type. She would often trip over her own words and talk in circles, but that was more or less the gist of what she said. So I was like, oh, you're giving me permission to not be perfect. That makes me feel really good. So just let the ISTJ feel things and don't try to belittle them. I know we can probably do the same thing, but I think when we do that, it's more so of we take issue when people use their feelings as justification for doing everything. Whereas I think we acknowledge that people can have feelings, we just want them to not lose sight of a rational objective in the process. Next up is show them results of their good deeds. A lot of times people say that ISTJs take their own actions for granted. They have a hard time patting themselves on the back, so to speak, because to them, they're very duty oriented, so they often think about doing stuff because it's the right thing to do or because their boss said so. They don't often come with the expectation that they're going to be complimented or that people are going to appreciate what they do because people are just so used to them being old reliable that they're just not expecting anything. When I go to the gym, I often work so hard to make sure I'm meticulously taking care of everything. Okay, every now and then I might slip. I'm not an EJ. But I still want to be very thorough in my job and make sure that the gym is up to adequate standards. And I hardly ever get thanked for my job. So as a result, I actually get very sad whenever I go into work because I feel like most of the people there don't really care about me. All they care about is their workout because they don't look at me, they don't nod or anything like that. And so I feel like, oh, is my job even worth it? Am I even worth it? And it makes me question my self-worth. So if you want to make sure that doesn't happen to an ISTJ in the future, don't just affirm them with words. Admittedly, if you affirm them with words enough, I think they'll start to catch the pattern. But show them that there's actually a tangible result of their work. Like for example, my friend Monica, when I when I first met her on mission trip, she and her friend Reba came and sat by me without being prompted. Well, technically, they were prompted by the Holy Spirit. And that simple act of them sitting next to me when 45 minutes before I had prayed that I would never have to see a girl again made me feel so happy because I was like, oh, girls actually give a darn about me. I thought they all hated me and wanted the worst for me. I guess maybe they can care about me after all. And I didn't think anything of it, really. I was just like, okay, they were happy to meet me. I guess we're moving on with our life. And so when I finally talked to Monica on the phone, 11 years later, took long enough, I said to her that she changed my life. And she was like, "Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you." And I was like, "Okay, that's it." But then Monica told me something else. She said, "Paul, I was at a meeting for couples, and my husband and I were asked to say some way in which God had spoken to us in our life." And she mentioned to all these other couples in the room that me telling her that she changed my life ended up changing her life because she realized that she had a purpose in life, and that if she died the next day, she would say, I actually had a purpose in my life. I actually did something good. So in that respect, her telling me that story affirmed that my presence and me telling her that she saved my life ended up making a difference in her life. Or in the case of, say, my friend Danielle, when she starts planning things, that's another tangible sign that my words have helped her, because she's not the greatest planner in the world. So when she actually does plan things, it means that she's been paying attention to my way of planning things and is approving of my methods, giving me more self-worth because I'm seeing actual results. I know that's a bit touchy-feely by ISTJ standards, but ISTJs are secretly touchy-feely themselves. You just don't see it much. So appreciate it when you have it. While I was editing this video, I actually came up with a better example of tangible results for my actions. So I'm sure most of you know the story of how I got out of depression. If you don't, the short version is that I spoke with a couple of girls on one of the conferences I chaperoned. I told them I was going through depression, but yet I pushed through the depression to want to make a difference in their lives and talk about Jesus and make sure that as many people as possible could be happy forever. And they said, "Oh yeah, Paul, you did make a difference." And so I got out of depression, and then when I went to the conference the following year, I somehow managed to run into at least three of them again. With having trouble with faces, that was easier said than done. One of them had to literally shout at me from behind saying, "Paul, it's me," so that I could actually recognize her. But regardless of that, one of them said, "You know what, Paul, you actually made such a difference at that conference that I changed my life around, and then I had a friend who was contemplating suicide, and I told her your words, and she said, oh, that Paul guy actually has some wisdom. I am going to keep my life." So the tangible result of my actions was that this girl that I had never even met is still alive because of what I did. Now that is what's going to make an ISTJ happy, is when you actually say more than just, "Oh, you make me happy. Oh, that meant so much to me." Is that you actually say, "Look, this wouldn't have been possible without you. Thank you for your effort." Next up is be straightforward. ISTJs don't like it when people talk very vaguely or don't give a lot of details. They like to be direct and not use a whole lot of sayings, and if they do, they're usually telling a joke. And they expect that of other people because they talk in a way that they would like to be talked to. So as a result, if they just get straight to the point and tell it to you as it is, that's how they want you to talk. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm bashing intuitives too much, but unfortunately, some of them have a tendency to expect that other people are as intuitive as them. And so therefore, if other people can catch the hidden meanings in what they're saying, surely ISTJs can too. Well, spoiler alert, we can't. Our introverted intuition is all the way in the eighth spot, so looking deeper into things, looking at hidden meanings, the big picture, doesn't make any sense to us. Not a single lick of sense. So that's why it's important to give as many concrete details as possible when you're talking. Explain your reasoning for everything. Don't just make a blanket statement and then forget to be specific about it. Usually, what I really like, for example, when people are commenting on my videos, if people just say, "Great video, Paul," that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me because there's so many unanswered questions like, okay, how is it a good video? Was it the production quality? Was it that I spoke clearly into the microphone? Was it that I didn't say a lot? What was it about the video that you liked? That's way too broad of a statement. But if someone says, okay, Paul, actually, this is a true story. I'll give you an example of where straightforwardness helped. My friend Kaylee said that she was going to watch every single one of my best games of the year videos so that she could adequately critique the current one and not repeat something that had already been improved over the other videos. Took her a while because she's very busy, but she eventually did keep her promise. So that's another thing ISTJ is like. I forgot to put that on my list, but like, keeping your promises is another big thing. And she went into as much depth as she could remember. She said, okay, in this video, you got so much better audio quality and better scripting. That's rich because most of my videos are unscripted. And she gave a whole bunch of detailed explanations of like, this was great, and this was great, and this was great. So instead of just saying, oh wow, this video was amazing, say why it was amazing. If you're busy, say why you're busy. If you are going to be late, say why you're going to be late. It may sound like you're giving too much additional information and we're being pesky, but you got to remember, we're inferior intuitives. We are not going to catch all of the implications, and we're naturally going to want to question things and gather information because we're dominant perceivers. So if you give us all of the information, then that's going to satisfy us because we're going to say, oh good, you've given me a thorough insight into how your brain works. Now I understand you better. Now I can know how to respect you better. I kind of repeated myself a little bit on accident, but the eighth thing I wrote down is give details. I kind of already said all of that. I probably should have thought that out better when I wrote this, The Joys of Unscripted Videos. But yes, ISTJs are detail-oriented, and they expect you to be detail-oriented as well. I guess this would be a good time to address what should you do if you're an inferior sensor, especially if you're an INFJ or INTJ, where giving sensory details is very hard for you. I would say that as much as you like to see the big picture, try to think about how you got to the big picture conclusion. Obviously, you didn't just snap your fingers and say, this is the big answer I came to. From what I understand about introverted intuition, you gather a lot of data to come to a realization of how it all fits together. ISTJs don't do that. They think from point A to point B to point C to point D and so on until you reach the letter Z or Z, wherever you live in the world. So as a result, if you're only talking about the end product and how everything fits together without talking about all the pieces, that's going to confuse them. So if you're able to think to yourself, and it might be very hard, I get it. If you're able to think to yourself, okay, these are the pieces of data that I gathered. You don't even have to mention how all of the data makes sense. Just mention the data. Just say, okay, I picked up on the fact that your eyebrows were twitching. Don't explain what it means. Just mention it. Okay, your eyebrows were twitching. Okay, your forehead crinkled. Okay, you scratched your head. Does it have to make sense? Does it all have to have some grand, crazy meaning? No. But the fact that you're giving details anyway is going to make the ISTJ happy. If they haven't developed their feeling function, they might wonder why you're phrasing it in such a way. But if you say, hey, I'm making sure that you can understand me, then they'll be like, oh, okay, fair enough. Generally speaking, most ISTJs don't pay much attention to Myers-Briggs. And if they do, they just don't express it enough online because our presence online is woefully undervalued. So they might not necessarily have the most charitable of things to say the dominant intuitives because they don't comprehend the idea that some people are going to think very differently than other people. And so I think if you have an ISTJ in your life that doesn't understand Myers-Briggs, mentioning that to them might actually help them know how to communicate with you better. Because let's be real, ISTJs are probably the most loyal and the most caring friends you will ever have. And they want to make sure that they are the ultimate, reliable, dependable people. That if you are in trouble, they will drive 3,000 miles to go see you if they're able to. Like, they're willing to go above and beyond because they don't let their feeling function get in the way of helping you. So, in the same way, if you mention to them that there's a system that governs how your brain is different than theirs, they're going to be more likely to say, "Oh, okay. So because you think this way, that means it's hard to think this way. So let's come to a compromise so that both of us can make sense of things." Then I think they're going to be more willing to listen. I feel like I left out a few things, but I think most of you already know the things that I left out. You obviously know that ISTJs like it when people keep their promises, are on time. They like results over words, and they especially like it when they're able to keep things the same and consistent. So hopefully, if you can at least remember the top one, which is remember stuff, don't be forgetful. Again, I had to stop myself from being insulting, but yeah, just don't be forgetful. And if you can at least remember that, you will already increase your friendship meter with an ISTJ so much. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in depth what you thought about the video and which tips were your favorites, and just as many details as you can think of. I love reading your comments and I love responding to them, so if you don't see that I responded to your comments, it's YouTube's fault. I would also like to thank my patrons Matthew Rakowski, Spoon Ghost Splatcat, and Scrooter Doodles for supporting me on Patreon. I know that's super annoying, but I gotta give credit where credit is due. I have the daylight scared out of me when I open my bank account nowadays, and with their help, they've helped me feel ever so slightly less scared of my bank account. So thank you very much to all of you. Even if you guys want to support me on Patreon but can't, the fact that you expressed that you want to but have financial difficulties means the world to me. So hope you all have a great day, and remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.